The script sat on Clint Eastwood's kitchen table like evidence of a crime. 93 pages. Stained coffee ring on the cover. Title in bold caps, Dirty Harry. He'd been staring at it for 20 minutes. Cigarette burning down between his fingers. Morning light coming through the window in dusty shafts. Warner Bros. Had sent it over 3 days ago. His agent had called twice. Just read it, Clint. See what you think. But Clint already knew what the studios thought. He'd heard the whispers. Knew the script had been passed around like a bad rumor. 5 major producers had already turned it down. Not interested. Too violent. Too controversial. Too political. Wrong tone for the times. The country was burning. Vietnam protests. Civil rights battles. Watergate brewing beneath the surface. People were angry at authority. Didn't trust the system. Wanted change. And here was a script about a cop who broke the rules, crossed lines, delivered justice with a .44 Magnum instead of due process. The kind of character that made studio executives nervous, made them worry about backlash, boycotts, bad press. Clint picked up the script and read the opening scene again. A sniper on a rooftop. A woman swimming in a pool. The shot. The blood spreading through the blue water. Then Detective Harry Callahan, standing over a bank robbery in progress, .44 Magnum pointed at a wounded criminal, asking the question that would become immortal, whether the punk felt lucky. Clint set the script down and walked to the window. His Malibu house looked out over the Pacific. Gray morning. Fog rolling in. He'd been acting for 15 years. Made a name playing the man with no name in Sergio Leone's westerns. Tough. Silent. Dangerous. But that was Italy. That was fantasy. This was America. This was contemporary. This was a character who'd either define his career or destroy it. The phone rang. His agent, Lenny Hershen. "Tell me you read it," Lenny said. I read it. And? Clint took a drag from his cigarette. It's good. Too good, that's the problem. The problem is nobody wants to make it. Frank Sinatra passed. John Wayne passed. Paul Newman wouldn't touch it. Burt Lancaster called it fascist. Robert Mitchum said it was a career killer. Clint closed his eyes. 5 producers. 5 different reasons. Same conclusion. Too risky. Too dark. Too complicated. The character wasn't a hero, wasn't likable. He bent the law, worked outside the system, used violence not as a last resort but as a tool. In 1971, with the country questioning authority, questioning police, questioning justice itself, this character felt like throwing gasoline on a fire. "What do you think?" Lenny asked. Clint thought about the westerns, the silent gunfighters, the moral simplicity of those stories. Good guys, bad guys, justice delivered cleanly. No mess, no questions. This script wasn't simple. Harry Callahan wasn't clean. He was angry, frustrated, fighting a system that protected criminals and tied the hands of the people trying to stop them. He was complicated, flawed, real. "I think it's the best script I've read in 5 years," Clint said quietly. Silence on the other end. Then Lenny's careful voice. "You want to do it. I want to do it. Clint, nobody wants to make this movie. Warner's is interested, but they're scared. They'll lowball the budget, bury the marketing. If it fails, they'll blame you. If it succeeds, they'll take credit. And either way, half the country is going to hate you for playing this character." Clint stubbed out his cigarette, set up a meeting. Warner Bros. Executive office. 3 days later, Clint sat across from 2 studio executives in expensive suits, who looked at him like he'd suggested burning down the building. The script sat on the desk between them. Nobody had touched it. "We appreciate your interest," the older executive said. Names didn't matter. Clint had learned that suits were interchangeable. But we have concerns. Clint nodded, waited. The character. He's not sympathetic. He tortures a suspect, steps on his wounded leg to get information, shoots people without hesitation. This isn't a hero. This is, the executive searched for the word. A cop, Clint finished, doing his job in a world where the rules protect the wrong people. The younger executive leaned forward. The rules exist for a reason, Mr. Eastwood. This script suggests they're obstacles. That justice requires breaking them. In the current climate, that's dangerous. In the current climate, Clint said slowly, people are tired of criminals getting away with murder because some lawyer found a technicality. They're tired of feeling helpless. This character speaks to that. This character could incite violence. This character responds to violence. There's a difference. The room went quiet. The executives exchanged glances, the kind of look that meant they'd already decided and were just going through the motions. We're willing to make the film, the older executive said carefully. Low budget. $4 million. Unknown director. Minimal marketing. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we limit our exposure. Clint understood what he wasn't saying. We don't believe in this. We're covering our ass. We'll make it cheap enough that failure doesn't hurt us, and success is pure profit. You're on your own. I want creative control, Clint said. Director approval. Final cut. The younger executive laughed. Actually laughed. Mr. Eastwood, you've never directed a feature film. You're an actor. A good one. But this is a complex production. Action sequences. Stunts. We need an experienced director. Then find one who understands the character. We did. He passed. They all passed. Because they know this film is a minefield. Clint stood. Then I'll direct it myself. The room froze. The executives stared at him like he'd spoken a language they didn't understand. You've never directed. I've watched directors for 15 years. Worked with Leone, Siegel, Sturges. I know how to frame a shot, how to pace a scene, how to get a performance. And I understand this character better than anyone, because I'm the one willing to play him. The older executive rubbed his face. If you direct, we cut the budget to $3 million. You get scale as an actor. And if it bombs, your directing career is over before it starts. If it bombs, it won't matter who directed it. They negotiated for 2 more hours, eventually settled on terms that gave Clint what he needed, and gave the studio enough distance to survive the fallout. $3 million budget. Clint as director and star. Don Siegel as mentor. Shooting schedule of 6 weeks. No major marketing push. Release in winter. Low expectations. Clint walked out of that office knowing he just bet his career on a character everyone said was too dark, too violent, too controversial. He also knew he was right. Casting took 3 weeks. Finding Scorpio the villain was easy. Andy Robinson understood the role. A serial killer. Psychotic. Evil. No redeeming qualities. The kind of monster that justified Harry's methods. But finding Harry's partner was harder. Every actor who read for it asked the same question. Is Harry the good guy or the bad guy? Clint's answer was always the same. He's a cop. They shot in San Francisco. Cold. Foggy. Mornings that smelled like salt and exhaust. Clint directed like he acted. Minimal takes. Efficient blocking. No wasted motion. He understood instinctively what the studios didn't. That Harry Callahan worked because he wasn't a superhero. He was tired. Frustrated. Doing a job nobody appreciated in a system designed to fail him. The scene where Harry steps on Scorpio's wounded leg was shot in 1 take. The studio had wanted it removed. Too brutal. Too cruel. Clint kept it in. Because that moment defined the character. Not a sadist, not a monster, just a man so desperate to save a kidnapped girl that he'd cross any line necessary. The audience needed to feel the weight of that choice. The cost. They filmed the final confrontation at a quarry outside the city. Harry tracking Scorpio. The shootout. The famous line about feeling lucky delivered one more time. And then Harry's final act, throwing his badge into the water. Walking away, not in triumph, in disgust. At the system. At himself. At what he'd become. Clint shot it at sunset. The light failing. Harry's silhouette disappearing into the dust. No music, no resolution. Just a man walking away from something he couldn't fix. The studio hated it. Wanted a cleaner ending. Wanted Harry validated. Wanted the system to work. Clint refused. The ambiguity was the point. Harry saved the girl. Stopped the killer. But in doing so became something he didn't want to be. That moral complexity was what made the film matter. Post-production was brutal. The studio tried to soften the violence, trim the controversial moments, add voiceover explaining Harry's motivations. Clint fought them on every edit, threatened to walk, reminded them contractually he had final cut. Eventually they backed down, mostly because they didn't think the film would succeed anyway. December 1971. Limited release. The studio buried it. Minimal advertising. No premiere. Just dumped it into theaters 3 weeks before Christmas when everyone was watching family films. Expected it to die quietly. Expected Clint's directing debut to be his last. The first weekend, it made $800,000. The second weekend, it doubled. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. Audiences who were tired of being told what to think. Tired of complicated moral lectures. Tired of movies that treated them like children who needed lessons. Flocked to see a film that showed them a complicated man making impossible choices in a broken system. Critics were split. Some called it fascist propaganda. Others called it brutally honest. The controversy fueled the box office. People went to see what the argument was about. Stayed because the film was riveting. Harry Callahan wasn't likable. Wasn't noble, but he was real. And in 1971, with the country drowning in cynicism and distrust, real was revolutionary. The film ran for 6 months, made $216 million worldwide, became a cultural phenomenon, spawned sequels, merchandise, endless debates about police power, justice, and morality. The studios that had rejected it scrambled to make similar films. Suddenly, everyone wanted tough, morally complex cops. Anti-heroes, characters who broke rules and asked questions later. Clint never gloated, never said I told you so. Just moved on to the next project. Directed more films. Played more complicated characters. Built a career on trusting his instincts when everyone else played it safe. But sometimes late at night, he'd think about that morning in Malibu. The script on his kitchen table. The coffee stain on the cover. 5 producers who'd passed. 5 different men who'd read the same pages and decided it was too risky, too dangerous, too complicated. They'd been right about one thing. The film was dangerous. It challenged audiences. Made them uncomfortable, forced them to question their assumptions about justice and morality and the cost of safety. It didn't provide easy answers, didn't validate either side of the cultural divide, just showed a man doing a brutal job in a brutal world, and asked the audience to decide whether his methods were justified. Some said yes, some said no, most said both. And that complexity, that refusal to preach or simplify, was what made the film endure. Years later, a young director asked Clint what made him fight so hard for Dirty Harry when everyone told him it would fail. Clint thought about it. The character felt true. Everybody wanted simple, clear, easy. Good guy wears a white hat. Bad guy wears black. Problem was the world wasn't like that anymore. Maybe never was. Harry lived in the mess, in the gray area, and people recognized themselves there. But you risked everything. Clint shrugged. Sometimes the only thing riskier than betting on something is letting someone else tell you it can't work. The script that 5 producers rejected became one of the most influential films in American cinema. Changed how audiences thought about heroes. Changed what studios thought was possible. Changed Clint Eastwood from an actor into a filmmaker. But none of that mattered in Malibu that morning when he'd sat alone with 93 pages and a decision. Trust the system that said no. Trust the experts who said it couldn't work. Or trust the instinct that said this character, this story, this moment was worth fighting for. He'd chosen the fight, and $216 million later, he'd proven that sometimes the best bet is the one nobody else is willing to make. Harry Callahan threw his badge away at the end of the film, walked into the sunset disillusioned and alone. Clint Eastwood walked into the sunset as a director. Validated, proven, and completely unsurprised. He'd known all along. Not because he was smarter than the producers who'd rejected it, but because he understood something they didn't. That audiences didn't want to be protected from complexity. They wanted to be trusted with it. Wanted stories that treated them like adults capable of handling moral ambiguity. The industry learned the wrong lesson. Thought Dirty Harry succeeded because of the violence. The tough talk. The iconic lines. Spent decades trying to replicate the surface while missing the depth. But Clint knew better. Knew the film worked because Harry Callahan wasn't a fantasy. He was a reflection. Flawed. Angry. Trying to do right in a world that made right impossible. And audiences saw themselves in that struggle. Saw their own frustration with systems that didn't work. Their own desire for justice even when justice was complicated. That was the bet Clint made. Not on violence or controversy or rebellion. On truth. On the uncomfortable, messy, complicated truth that most people live in the gray area. And most heroes are just tired men doing their best in impossible situations. 5 producers said no. 1 actor said yes. And cinema changed.